This episode is brought to you by ProMensal.
We kind of would love it if women can take back the power. I'm getting older and I'm aging, but I'm not old.
Welcome to another series of Thriving in Menopause, brought to you by Prevention Magazine. I'm Andrea Duval, and we're starting this series with some very special guests. Today, I'm joined by journalist and author Melissa Doyle and her colleague Naima Brown, who have just published a new book aimed at, guess what? Us, women in midlife. And it's called How to Age Against the Machine. First of all, welcome both of you to Thriving in Menopause.
Thanks, Andrea.
Thank you.
I want to start by asking you, Melissa, if you can describe what the book's about and why it's so relevant for our listeners.
We like to think of it a bit of a Bible for aging. So imagine what to expect when you're expecting. That's the book that you buy everyone who's about to have a baby or, gets pregnant. This is the book for anyone that's getting older, which hopefully is going to be all of us. It's a how-to guide. We've broken it down into all the information covering all the areas that we felt we wanted to know more about and talk about. A lot of them are topics that aren't necessarily spoken about openly, menopause being a perfect example. Then we talk about things like planning for retirement. What do you do? Coping with grief, changing relationships. Kind of just everything that comes with getting older.
Look, it's a beautifully designed and presented book, and I love the button on the cover which says, the book every woman over 40 needs. It's almost the kind of book that we talk often about how menopause is something that your mother never sits down and has a chat with you about. But if she could give you this book, it would probably answer all those questions for you and make you prepared. Because one of the things that we're very aware of is that women are not prepared for the changes that start to take place in their brains and bodies from their 40s onwards.
I had no idea. I had absolutely no idea. I feel like we just didn't. It's not a topic of conversation, is it? Where you sit around the dinner table with a glass of wine and go, so are you getting hot flushes?
We do now. We do now because of the book, which I think is a tangible change in our own lives. That these are conversations we bring up really readily, maybe too much now with each other, but it's so important.
And why? Our question was why. We talk about, there's a lot of information about puberty, boys and girls going through puberty and what that is doing to their body, what that's doing to their emotions. There's a lot of conversation around once a woman is of childbearing years and what happens to her body there. And there's so many conversations about these almost like, I guess if I could call them health milestones, changing milestones within a woman's life. But menopause is kind of a bit of a taboo. Nobody wants to admit. It's almost like, I feel traditionally, if you'd ever put up your hand and said you were going through it, it instantly aged you. A little bit like grey hair. The second you see someone with grey hair, you go, oh, they must be of a certain age. Menopause is a little bit like that. But why? Every woman goes through it.
I want to find out firstly, how did you meet?
We worked together on Sunday night. So Naima, best producer ever, and I was working with her in my capacity as a reporter, and Naima was producer. And, it's like any work environment. There are just some people that you click with. We've had some wonderful adventures both here and around the world where we just worked really well together. And so that friendship stayed beyond working on that program. Most of this grew from conversations that we had, either with a cup of tea or a glass of wine, and we realised that if we were asking all of these questions and wanting to find information and having these conversations, we were sure as hell we weren't the only women. And as journalists, the two of us, then the logical next step is to do a bit of research and put it on a piece of paper, which is what we did.
Yes.
And I think, Melissa, one of the things about being in the public eye as much as you've been, people have seen you go through this process of your 40s and it's not been easy for you, and you're quite candid in the book about the challenges you face. Perhaps you can share with us a little bit about what that felt like.
Yeah, and I always chose to share because I think one of the things I love about women is our power of sharing. You go to a dinner and you sit down next to someone you meet for the first time, and I don't know about you, but by the end of dessert, I know everything about her life. She knows everything about mine. We're besties. I just think that power of connection is so incredible. Sharing stories is what we do as humans to connect us, and I just have always felt that I'm so privileged to be in a position where I do have a profile. I want to use it to shine a light on things that matter. And I'm shining a light on getting older because this is what I'm living. Here I am, 53, asking a lot of the questions that we've got in the book. I've got aging parents. I've got children who are ending their teens and in their 20s and leaving home, and I'm facing what every woman is facing. So I want to shine a light and talk about it. And the more we talk about it together, the more we share honestly, the good and the bad, the better it makes the rest of us feel. I feel the same when I hear from somebody else who's experiencing something and they're quite candid about it. And I go, oh my God, thank goodness it's not only me that feels that way. One of the things that shocked us the most, how many women use the term invisible? They get to an age and they start to feel invisible. And that saddened us and fired us up.
There was a question that rose to the surface for us pretty early on in the research and writing phase of this book, which was, what is the difference between becoming elderly and becoming an elder? And we quickly realized that how you might approach that answer, even in your own life, how you might answer that question has a lot to say or indicate about your aging process and whether you are on a pathway of dignity, of purpose, of connectivity, or whether you're starting to feel that sense of being pushed aside, sat in the corner with your knitting needles, which is, I think knitting's very cool. It's not something that I know how to do, and there is some great knitting out there, so I'm not maligning it. But, in our attempts to stay visible, to stay relevant, I think that really is how we personally came to answer that question, that being an elder is not just that kind of celebration of aging in a tokenistic way, but a true acknowledgement that your experience that comes with age is of value and has a role to play in any industry, in any environment, and that it's because of your age that you are qualified for this, not in spite of it.
Because I think it's so easy for us to feel forgotten, pushed aside, invisible, whatever all of those negative words are, where the more women we spoke to, we recognised it has to actually be a thought process where you go, you know what, damn it, I've got 50 years of experience. This is what I've done. This is who I am. This is what I've learnt along my path. This is what I can do with it now. This is how I can potentially share it, and not letting anybody make them feel less, not letting anybody make them feel as though they don't matter or they're not important and dismissing them. So what if I'm over a certain age, or I've got a couple of, Arctic blondes, as I call them, poking through, big deal. I'm smarter and more experienced than I was 20 years ago.
Yeah. We'll be right back after this.
Perimenopause can actually start in your 40s. Declining estrogen production during perimenopause brings on changes to menstrual cycles and often the onset of hot flushes, night sweats, mood swings, and sexual problems. Promensal Peri is specifically designed for perimenopausal women and can help relieve these common menopausal symptoms. Promensal Peri is available at leading pharmacies across Australia and offers a cost-effective treatment at under $1 a day. When things start to change, try Promensal Peri. Always read the label and follow the directions for use.
Okay, we're back. Coming back to one of the things you were saying earlier, the interesting question is, at what age do we consider ourselves to be officially aging?
We talk about this a lot, don't we?
We just talked about this as we walked Mel's gorgeous dog this morning. After exploring all of the data, all of the focus groups, mostly in Australia, America, and the UK, the answer seems to be distilled into old is anyone older than you. But then it's also what's being reflected back to us by our society, by our communities. These categories are things that have changed and shifted over time. And I do think that we are living through one of those shifts right now. We feel that our beautiful little book here is emerging into a conversation about women and aging that I don't think we were having a couple of years ago. And I think people are starting to want to expand and perhaps redefine what old or aging or being older means.
And we are aging from the day we're born. And I think that's really important to remember. And so why has there always been this halfway point where suddenly you've gone from young to old? Like, you know, at 5, you're older than you were at 4. And at 35, you're older than you were at 34. So it's probably a bit of an attitude that comes from within the person, but I think it's also the perception of society, the perception that comes back upon us, and the perception that we feel. You know, we kind of would love it if women can take back the power. Like, yeah, I'm getting older and I'm aging, but I'm not old.
So let's speak about some of the women that you have spoken to in the book. People like Tina Arena, Rachel Griffiths, Paulina Poroskova. What was some of the things they shared with you that you have taken away?
Their guts, their defiance, their wisdom. Rachel shared with us that as she got older, she felt the power to be a director, to do some of the things that in her field she may have been a little more apprehensive to do when she was younger, and reaching an age where going, damn it, I know this industry, I know what I can do, I'm going to Ride Like a Girl, and it's going to be brilliant. And it is. Tina Arena in that fantastic ARIA speech back in 2015 where she said, I'll be the one that'll decide when I stop making music, not a radio station, because it won't play music of a woman of a certain age and just play young people's music, you know. So the power that these women were able to find as they got older and wiser and braver and gutsier, I think that's what we took from them, wasn't it? That strength.
Absolutely. Paulina Poroskova, I think, is holding on very tightly to a really important part of this conversation, that can be encapsulated in the hashtag that she invented that I think is so great, which is between J-Lo and Betty White. So, you know, you're either the kind of, you know, 50-year-old J-Lo who's just got all the tools at her disposal to really defy, I guess, the kind of standard aging process that most of us are exposed to. And then you've got Betty White, you know, your beloved elder, you know, very much into the white hair phase of her life, right? But then there's this gap in between. There's this long period of time.
It's like 50
and
years.
Experience, yes, in between J-Lo and Betty White. And Paulina is having and instigating a really vital conversation, mostly because she obviously comes from the fashion and modeling world, around the external experience of aging and the options that we have. And her decision, with no judgment to women that go in a different direction, but her decision to not intervene with that. When she sees her cohort around her taking measures to reduce the appearance of aging, and she's saying, well, I'm going to just ride this wave in a different way.
And she talked about, she posts photos of herself in bikinis or in sexy underwear, and my God, she looks fantastic. And then the comments that she gets back going, oh, put it away, you're too old, you should be looking after your grandchildren. And that resistance from her going, well, why should I? And you know, why is there a number attached to suddenly you've got to dress differently, or you've got to act differently, or you've got to tuck yourself away, or you've got to reduce make your hemlines longer, or, you know, maybe suddenly you've got to wear pantyhose, or I don't know, but why do we put that on women? And she's fighting back.
Well, I'm in perimenopause. I'm 44. And what I did not know, and I'm putting my hands up with my own blind spot here until we wrote the book, is how long perimenopause is. I always knew that this thing called menopause was coming up sometime down the tracks, and I kind of thought it was like a giant wall I just slam into one day. But perimenopause, for any listeners who aren't aware of this, can be a decade-long process. It's a slow shift that our bodies and our brains and our hormones are going through. And I think that recognizing that this is a phase, a period of time to travel through and be aware of and invested in, rather than to kind of get scared of and then try to race to the other side as fast as you can, because you can't. It's something that we have to be, I think, quite
comfortable with,
yes,
more than we have been. Maybe we can't do a lot about it. One of the things I loved when Naima is my gorgeous Californian hippie friend, and I'm so thankful because I've learned so much. She took me to a women's circle, which I'd never done in my life. But one of the things we learned from that was amazing was looking at the seasons. When you're young and you're born, you're in spring, and then you go into summer, and then there's the autumn phase of your life, and then there's winter. And they're all important. They're all to be celebrated. Every season is unique in its own glorious way. Spring is really no better than winter. It's different, but they are all to be celebrated. So I guess whether you look at that perimenopause, menopause phase as autumn, autumn is beautiful. So I think we learnt that each stage in our lives just needs to be celebrated and savoured more for what it is. You know, I look at perimenopause, that is at the end of a cycle where I was lucky enough as a woman to be able to have 2 children. And ultimately menopause will come, and that chapter for me is, well and truly closed. But then you go into the next phase of your life. And I think we recognise that all of those stages, some of them have challenges, there's no doubt, but God, they need to be celebrated. They're glorious.
So I really am intrigued to know how you perhaps change the way you look at yourself, the things you might do for your health every day, the way you might value yourself. What's changed?
I think I definitely take more care of myself. I like to think of how I would speak to and look after a friend. I need this body and mind to go another 50 years. You know, I've got no doubt I'm going to be here till 100 because I've got so many things I want to do. So I need to make sure I care for the vehicle, I guess, and look after it. I think writing this taught me to maybe go a little gently. You know, when you're in your 20s, you work your bum off because you're trying to get your career underway. When you're in your 30s, for me, it was having 2 small children and working shift work, you know, doing breakfast television and getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning and coming home to 2 little kids. And in my 40s, they were a little bit older, but I was really just, you know, there was so much going on in life. I chose it and I owned it. And I always reminded myself that if ever I didn't want to or I couldn't do it, I could make a choice to do something different, but that's what I wanted to do. And so I think now that I'm in my 50s, my priorities have shifted a little more. One of my children has left home. One's still at home. She's at uni. She's completely self-sufficient. I do have the time and the capacity to slow down a little bit and maybe carve out some time for me. I still struggle with it. It's not a natural default for me. If I don't have something to do that day, I'll create something. I'll go and plant a tree, paint a wall. You know, I'm just not very good at sitting still, but I'm trying to learn. And if that is what is going to bring me longevity, if that's what is going to be good for my physical and mental health, then I'll make sure I find a way to do it.
I think it's something nice to remember when we're hurtling through our 40s, juggling everything, that there is another phase coming.
Yeah, it doesn't last forever. It does get easier.
Where we get to be utterly selfish in a way. Do I want to read a book? Do I want to play tennis? I don't know. Maybe I'll go and have dinner with girlfriends.
If Mel's not quite ready to spend the arvo on the couch with a book because she's got a million ideas for fabulous things, important things, and I know she doesn't have it on good authority, I think that we should be championing whatever roadmap any woman particularly chooses for her own life.
It's so interesting to watch the bestie dynamic between the two of you because you're clearly really
it's that
close.
100% brain thing, you know, like I say, ebbs and flows.
So let's talk about friendship.
I mean, I think that it's not dramatic to say that it's life-saving. This particular study that we cite in the book comes out of the UK, but it talks about the fact that women fare a little bit better than men as we age with our mental health because, as Mel said earlier, the power of female friendship. I mean, my husband can spend an entire day with a group of his mates, and I might ask him at the end of the day, what did they talk about? What new things do you know about each other? And it's just crickets, right? That's not how women are with each other. And that sustains us in the end. So it's not a cliche or just a turn of phrase to say that, you know, my friendship with Mel is life-saving.
You know, I probably learnt more about menopause pre-researching this book from friends. You know, it's like when you've got a new baby, isn't it? And you're in a mother's group and you all sit around together and be, oh my God, I've been up all night. The baby was vomiting and doing this and what do I do? We need to keep that conversation going as we get older.
I'm going to ask each of you, what's the one piece of advice you were told that means the most to you?
One of the ones I want to stand on the rooftop and shout through a bullhorn about, and it is women and money. You know, coming into my 40s, I am looking at other women around me in their 40s, and I am much more vocal than I would have been before this process of saying, this is a very important decade of work for you. Are you saving? Are you setting enough aside for your superannuation? Are you thinking about retirement? These are conversations I would have frankly found a little bit dry and boring, right? When we could talk about so many other things, why do we want to talk about our super? But when you see women slip through the cracks, when you see how easy it is and how much shame surrounds all of that, we just must start having conversations with each other about whether or not we are setting ourselves up safely.
We'll be right back after this. Okay, we're back.
I think for me, it was that concept of potentially having to repurpose your life, that for many women, they've grown up, they've raised a family, they've devoted time to their children, to their partner, to their career. Maybe they were a carer for their parents. Our role through a lot of our life is to be a carer, to nurture, to look after others. And that sometimes a woman can now find herself at a point in life where her parents may no longer be with her. Her children might have left home. She may or may not still be in a relationship. She may or may not still be working. What do you do now? Where do you go next? What is the next step? And we came back to the premise that you need purpose and meaning in life. We all need purpose and meaning. You need somewhere to be, something to do, someone to love, and then sometimes you need to treat yourself as a bit of a project. All right, here I am. This is where I'm at in life. These are all the things that have changed. I'm no longer required to do A, B, and C, and I no longer have this as my focus. What is it going to be next? And having a sense of purpose is so important. And maybe it requires sitting down and actually thinking about it. What am I going to do next? What will I do with the next X number of years in front of me? Because I am still a smart, capable, incredible human who has so much to contribute. What am I going to do?
So I ask you, Melissa, what are you going to do?
I'm loving the place I'm in now. I'm extremely satisfied career-wise. I'm watching my children grow up and go through their next phase. In my relationship, John and I, we dashed off earlier this year overseas, the two of us. I mean, my gosh, that hasn't happened forever. So I think in all of those ways, I feel so lucky that I am fulfilled, and I'm loving that I'm able to use my voice for things that I think matter. And Naima and I can write a book like this that, without wanting to sound like we're talking ourselves up, we're really proud of it. We actually think it's important. I feel like thankfully, the conversation is having its moment finally. We are seeing a lot more, particularly high profile people talking openly about this phase of life. And you've got beautiful Naomi Watts talking openly about menopause in a way that wasn't spoken about. And, so many women are. So it's definitely a conversation that as a society we're having, thank goodness, about time. So yeah, we're going to keep banging on the drum as much as we can because we need things to change.
Thank you both so much for coming in. And I hope that all of you listeners have a look at this book. It's a super valuable resource, and I appreciate your time today. Thanks very much, listeners, for joining us. That's all we have time for. Meanwhile, for more practical advice to help you live your best life at midlife, do pick up a copy of Prevention Magazine. I'm Andrea Duval, and I'll see you next time.